Welcome back to Q13 News. So this morning we've been giving you tools to, help prep and get your kids back to school. And really there's a lot in that process. So this morning I am joined by Deana and Kira from the podcast Raising Adults Future Focused Parenting. Two of, as I mentioned before the break, smartest parents I know. And thank you for not being judgy when you're such smart parents.
Absolutely.
And we talked about easing back into the school year after the lazy summer about an hour ago. But now we want to talk about goals and being more focused sort of as we head into the school year. So what do we know about, or what do we need to know about goals?
Yeah, and we really suggest setting goals. It's great. But a lot of families end up focusing on the tangible goals, like what are you going to work on with your grades, or maybe this year you'd like to score a goal on that soccer team or nail that drama audition. And we really also encourage intangible goals. Maybe you'd like to work on being more assertive. Maybe you're going to try something new. And those are just as important. And you can find out about those by talking with your children. What are you hoping to get out of this year? What are you wanting to see? Or maybe what are your concerns? And as your child talks to you about what they're envisioning for their year, or maybe what they're worried about, it can really help you shape what the goals are. So again, we suggest tangible and intangible goals.
How do you focus those goals? I think talking to your kids would be a great first step, but then those goals can feel really big and like, oh, am I going to really make progress?
Yeah, and you might have to even break your school year up a little smaller. Maybe what are we going to focus on this quarter or between now and Christmas, so that you don't end up biting off more than you can chew, and it can feel really overwhelming that way.
I think that's really good advice.
You can set some really clear examples of, let's say you're working on being assertive this year. Your child's going to ask for help. What is that going to look like? How are we going to know when we've seen you achieve that goal?
Yeah, I like that.
And then how do we celebrate that when we see that you've done that?
It also feels like it's a chance for me to demonstrate doing those things. Watch as I do these
Absolutely.
things. When I do them, explain to my kids that we're doing.
Modeling is huge, for sure.
Let's also talk about boundaries. I mean, that can be a really... Summer, let's be honest, everything's out the window and there is no boundaries. But we really do need to talk about boundaries as we get back to school. So what's your best advice for boundaries?
Well, I think there's, the boundaries for the kids are things like thinking about reasonable bedtime, like we talked about last hour, not having too many activities at the start. But I also think, and we discuss this a lot, it's so important that parents are getting clear about their own boundaries. Because as a parent, there's a lot of back to school expectations, and it's really easy for us to feel like we're failing if we're not doing everything.
Yeah.
And so we really encourage parents right now in these weeks leading up, get really clear on what you think you can handle next year. What do you actually think that you are able to do, so that when you achieve that, you feel successful instead of trying to take on everything. Now you're overwhelmed and you feel like you're failing. I'm
going to be honest, right now I'm getting a lot of messages and emails from our PTA, like, go to this thing, come to this thing, be a part of this thing, and I'm like, am I a terrible dad that I'm just ignoring these right now? Because I just want to get our kid into school right now.
For sure.
It feels difficult, like I'm being judged by other parents if I don't do it, or I'm missing this opportunity where I could advocate for my kid. That feels hard to me.
It does, and so we really recommend, we're all about the why of future-focused parenting. We want parents to be intentional and know the why behind the what of their parenting choices. And so we recommend the same thing about volunteering. Are you creating dinosaur sandwich shapes in your kids' lunch because the other parents are, and you feel pressured? Or are you doing the bake sale because the PTA pressured you? Well, then that volunteer role is probably going to feel like an obligation and a burden. But the flip side of that is, what do you enjoy? Maybe you really like art, so you want to volunteer at craft time. Or maybe it's important to you that your child ride in your car, so it's worth it to sign up for that field trip. And when you're doing things that you, A, either enjoy, or B, really match your family values, then those volunteer roles don't feel so obligatory.
It feels like a really good conversation to have when it comes to boundaries for your kids, but also with your spouse and with your family as a goal. So goals and boundaries seem to be almost two separate conversations to have over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, really critical.
Awesome. All right, so tell us where we can get your podcast and more of your parenting resources.
So our resources are at futurefocusedparenting.com. Our podcast is called Raising Adults. We're not really about raising kids. We want to raise fully functioning adults out into the world. And you can find the podcast on all major podcast platforms.
And I cannot recommend it enough. That is fantastic stuff. So thank you very much for being here and helping us set some goals and some boundaries.